Afternoon, everyone. Welcome once again to our LGW COVID-19 frontline conversation. And we're really honored this time to have Roderick Johnson with us, class of 2011 from the Small Business Administration. And there's really been, other than HHS perhaps, or CDC, or NIH, I think that the federal agency that's gotten the most publicity over the last few weeks has been the SBA because of all the money that's been flowing through you all. So Rod, thank you very much for being here with us. Thanks for your time. I could just turn this over to you and let you just talk for an hour, but I won't do that. At the end, I want to get towards things people need to look out for as they reopen. But how are you doing personally?
Actually, I'm doing well. Frankly, we've been putting in 14 to 16-hour days at the SBA. Because, when there's nearly $3 trillion that's been approved and you're putting that out within a span of 7 weeks, you can't imagine the stress that we're all under between the Treasury Department and the SBA. But other than that, doing well. I do try to, squeeze in a half hour of some physical activity, to get myself rejuvenated and continuing to represent the small businesses out there and get money in their hands.
So you're working from home, it looks like.
So I'm working from home, yes.
How long have you been doing that?
Actually, since the middle of March, I've been teleworking.
In your office everyone is working?
Everyone is at home. Everyone is home.
So you're processing all these loan applications and everything else?
Well, yeah. Well, actually, for the emergency injury disaster loan program, that's being handled out of Fort Worth, Texas. Okay. So they're the ones that are processing the loans. I'll just state up front that they have received since March 4 million applications for that program. And if you remember, on a Wednesday night, President Trump stood up and said that we want to approve $50 billion to put on the streets for small businesses. And then that was on a Wednesday night at 9 o'clock, and then Thursday morning, that's when we went into action at the SBA.
So what was it like to sort of get that announcement and realize you're going to have to funnel hundreds of billions of dollars through to businesses and banks in the economy? I mean, what's that? Give us an example. Give us a comparison of normally how much money do you push through in a year versus what you're dealing with now?
It's certainly not between the two programs, right? So between PPP-1 and PPP-2, that's $610 billion, okay? And then EIDL, that's another $120 billion. Now, we may do maybe $1 billion, $2 billion at most, right? In an entire year, okay? And so now, I mean, we're looking at between those two programs, $1 trillion just by itself. Okay.
$1 trillion in 2 months versus $4 billion over the entire year.
In a year, that's right.
Well, that's got to stress you out.
So that's very stressful. And then remember, so the SBA operates through a standard operating procedure. Okay. So now the CARES Act is passed. The original amount was $350 billion. And so through our Capital Access Office, now we have to hurry up and update the SOP to accommodate the new rules under the CARES Act. All right, so that's what took us about a week to actually implement, the PPP program, because we had to update the SOP. Then we have to go ahead and push that information to the banks all across the country on how these deals are going to be underwritten. And so there was conformity as to how these deals were going to be underwritten, right? No personal guarantees, no collateral. The companies must use the money within 8 weeks. If it's not used properly, then it turns into a 2-year loan. That 75% of it must be used for payroll, the other 25% for, utilities and rent payments. So, we had to get all of that in the SOP, roll that all out to the banks so that they could open the doors to start processing, the applications that were coming in. Huge task, huge task. On top of receiving, 4 million applications for the EIDL program that the SBA is running through its Office of Disaster Assistance arm.
So you're making a lot of these decisions on the fly. I mean, you have to because of the nature of what's happening and the urgency with how people need the funding. And LGW got a PPP loan. We hope it's going to be forgiven, working through our bank PNC, and that worked very well. But PNC took them some time to get us the guidelines or get us what we needed to do to fill out the application process. So that kept changing as well. And now in PPP2, I think the rules are changing a little bit as well that way.
So for example, to your point, under the first interim ruling, an employer could include 1099 workers, okay? Then as we progressed through the program, that changed because it was looked at as double dipping, because a 1099 is really an independent contractor. And so we said, well, the 1099 guy can either approve they can actually apply on their own through PPP or the EIDL program. So that's when we said, employers, no, you cannot include your 1099s now in your payroll calculation. So yes, the rules were constantly changing, and almost it felt like on a daily basis. And then they have to push that information out to the banks so that they are applying the rules in accordance with the act. It was a lot of stress.
So I should have started with this in the beginning. Let's back up a little bit. So give us an explanation of PPP and the EIDL program in case anyone out there doesn't know what this is.
I was going to say, I would hope by now that people would know. But let me give you some numbers, because I think people need to hear these numbers, because people are wondering, why is it taking so long, either for the PPP or for the EIDL program? So I'll go with PPP2 because I have the latest numbers from this past Wednesday evening. So for PPP2, there's been 2.5 million applications processed and approved $190 billion. Okay, so remember now, it's 310 that has been appropriated. And so already 190 billion has been approved and is getting out on the streets of America. So there's approximately, I would say now it's Friday, so we probably have about 100 to $110 billion left in the program. So if you have not applied, please, get to your bank, get to the fintechs like Cabbage, On Deck, PayPal, get to the regional banks, the community banks, your money center banks, get there and apply for the money. All right, so let's talk about PPP. So the loan amount that you can receive is $10 million. It has a 2-year repayment period. The interest rate on it is 1%. 1% interest. Can you believe that? Not in my lifetime have I seen a 1% interest rate on any loan. Okay. It must be specific. 75% of the funds must be used for payroll. And then, as I said earlier, the other 25% can be used for, your lease, rent, payments, the interest on your commercial mortgage, utilities. And let me define the utilities, because now people don't know what utilities are. And so let me define that for you. It's your gas, electric, water, business internet, business telephone are considered, utilities for that 25% portion of the loan to be forgiven. And so again, 25% for utilities, 75% for payroll, so that at the end of the 8 weeks, you'll approach your bank and ask for the loan to be forgiven. Okay, so that's your PPP. Your economic injury disaster loan program, where you apply directly through the SBA portal. The loan amount was up to 2 million. Now it's down to 150,000 maximum. Okay. Your repayment which is unheard of on a commercial loan, is 30 years, a 30-year repayment, fixed rate at 4% over a 30-year period. The money can be used for accounts payables, it can be used for utilities, it can be used for payroll, okay? You don't have to offer any personal guarantees up to $25,000. Over $25,000, you have to submit collateral, which is generally going to be a second, third, or fourth trust on your house, along with your business assets. And again, originally the loan amount was up to $2 million, but because we're now beginning to run out of funds, they're capping it at $150,000. Now, as you talk about change on the fly, when the program was originally rolled out, it didn't have what we're calling an advance, right? That could be forgivable immediately. So what's the advance? So what people heard in the media was that automatically you would get just $10,000 just for applying to the program. Well, it's all in the details. So it's $1,000 per full-time or part-time employee up to $10,000. So if you have 10 employees, you get $10,000. That loan is then forgiven. Well, they're calling it an advance. So the advance is actually forgiven, okay? And then you receive that whether or not your idle loan is paid, is approved, okay? So automatically you apply for that and you get $10,000 if you have 10 employees. Two employees is $2,000. So I'm encouraging your 1099s, your sole proprietor, your single member LLCs to actually apply for that. And of course, religious organizations of any size can actually apply to the idle loan program.
But you can't double dip here. You can't apply for PPP and idle.
But yes, you can. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. All right. Now, here's what you do. Now, you can't use the loans for the same purpose. So if you applied for idle, and let's just say you use idle to pay for your utilities. You apply for PPP, obviously to sustain your payroll, okay? So what you can do is use some of the money that you receive from PPP to pay off your idle, okay? So now you have one loan, and now that one loan becomes forgivable under PPP. Just remember, you can't use them both for the same, so you can't use them both for payroll. So use the idle for other expenses, accounts payables, utilities. Use some of the funds from PPP to pay off the idle. Now you have a 100% forgivable loan.
Wow. So we're getting some questions from the people on the webinar. One is, when does the 8-week period start?
Good question, because some people thought it started actually when they received the approval from the bank. The 8 weeks actually starts once you are funded. Once that money hits your bank account, that's when the 8 weeks starts. Now, let me say this. I've had questions about, well, can I use that money to pay bonuses for the employees that have been loyal to me? No. It's only what shows up in that 941. Let the 941 that you file on a quarterly basis be your guide. That's how you use the money. If you want to pay bonuses, then you need to pay that out of your excess money that you've put aside, okay? And remember, you cannot factor 1099 people into the equation.
So that question came from Maria Rodriguez. Maria, thank you very much for that. We have another one from Kim Alfonso saying she applied for idle over a month ago and never heard anything.
Okay.
Assume that she's not going to get it. Should she do another application?
All right, so this is going to be nuanced. So if you applied in the beginning, you should have received a confirmation number that started in, we'll say, the 2000s, okay? If you applied a little later, say late March, early April, you received a confirmation number that began in the 3000s. Now, typically, if you received a confirmation number in the 3000s, that means that you should have checked the box for being able to get the forgivable loan. If you received it in the 2000s, you should have received an email from the SBA stating to apply so that you can check the box off to get, that advance. Now, both of those applications are going to be merged, so you won't be going to the end of the line, but you will get the money, the advance money first while they're still processing your loan, okay? But remember, there are over 4 million applications, and so we've had to actually shut down the portal for idle so that we can catch up and actually get, approve these loans and get them into the hands of people. So just be patient with us because it's a lot of processing.
But it's safe to say if you don't have a confirmation number, nobody got your application.
No one, that's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Another question from Maria, can you use the PPP money to fund 401ks for your staff?
Well, that should be a part of the calculation, right? In the 940, that should be a part of the calculation. So yes, the short answer is yes.
And Lance Ford wants to know, can you use cell phone expenses as part of this? Is that are they eligible for telephone utilities?
Yep, that's under utilities. It sure is. As long as it's used for business, yes, you can. And of course, what you want to do for the forgiveness piece of it is submit if it's a cell phone, submit the cell phone bill, okay, to be able to prove that it was used for business purposes. So obviously the phone bill should be, as well as the internet, should be in the business's name, because that's the documentation that you're going to provide to the bank to prove that you've used the funds in the appropriate manner.
How about, so there was a lot of questions about the forgiveness of the loan and some confusion there. And people were saying, well, gee, I can't spend the money because I don't know if it's going to be forgiven. You all, I think, are coming up with the forgiveness rules and regs. When do we expect to see those, and when can you apply for forgiveness? Do you have to wait for these regs to come out?
All right, so the final ruling on forgiveness should be coming out, we're hoping, within the next week. The Treasury Department and SBA are still working together to finalize what the rules are going to be. But just know that what you do know is that 75% of the money needs to be used for payroll and the other 25% for utilities. And you're going to be able, you need to be able to submit the documentation to show how the money has been used. Now, to me, a best practice has been to actually open another account for the PPP money to go into, okay? And so then you don't have to worry about the commingling of the funds in your regular business checking account. So if you have a dedicated account just for the PPP money, then the bank will be able to see, and this is what you would use as part of your documentation, because then you just print off the bank account and say, okay, I ran the utilities through this account, the payroll through this account. And so bank, you can see that I have used the funds appropriately. And so therefore the loan should be forgiven. Now, to me, the time to approach your bank about loan forgiveness is around week 7. Let's make sure that you have all of your documentation ready to submit to them by the end of 8 weeks. Now, the bank has 60 days to review your documentation. After 60 days, the bank will submit, well, it's going to be a group of files, but the bank will send your file over to the SBA. We have 30 days to review those files to determine whether or not your loan should be forgiven. So that's actually the process right now, according to the latest interim ruling. But again, we're hoping in another week, we'll get the final ruling on loan forgiveness.
So we're going to ask you to pull out your crystal ball here for a second. And I know it's very difficult to try to figure out what's going to happen. The House has a $3 trillion bill. They are pushing, the Senate has said, we're not going to do anything. But the question from Saurabh Kapoor is, do you envision another round of PPP to further fund people that got funding in the first two rounds?
All right.
Envision another round of PPP at all for anyone?
Okay. So let me give you a little editorial. I don't understand, honestly, why we need to pause at all. Okay. Because there are a lot of people hurting. Now, if you don't mind, I want to read a couple of things from what I saw this morning in the Washington Post. In the last week, we've had 3 million more Americans file for unemployment, okay, since March. That brings the total to 36.5 million people that have applied for unemployment within the last 8 weeks. The people that have been impacted are low-wage people during this COVID-19 that work for gyms, hotels, restaurants, and other small businesses. People are hurting, okay? About half of the businesses, small businesses, will be out of cash within the next month. Over a third of people who were laid off in April couldn't pay their, in March, couldn't pay their bills in April, okay? And so when I read things like this, I don't see that there needs to be any pause to determine the impact to the economy. I think Congress needs to go ahead and pass another round of PPP and to continue to fund the EIDL loan program, because there's still a lot of businesses and individuals that are suffering right now because of this pandemic.
But here's the challenge. You're not a member of Congress, neither am I, so I hope they're listening to this. Somebody asked, Denise Hart asked, that they got the PPP in the first round. Can they now apply for EIDL? She's heard they weren't accepting any more applications for EIDL except for farm-related businesses.
Okay, so that's true. We've had to close down the EIDL portal. Actually, it's been 2 weeks now. And yes, it is farmers that can apply. And again, we're just trying to get through the 4 million applications from across the country. Look, when I started out at the SBA, I started out in the Office of Disaster Assistance working through Hurricane Harvey and Maria, and I was assigned the Puerto Rico duty. And you just cannot imagine the number of applications that come in through the Office of Disaster Assistance. This by far, I can tell you, this by far is the largest disaster that the Office of Disaster Assistance has handled. And when you think about it, we had to go out and try to hire a lot of people to process these $4 million loans. Hire them, train them to process, and approve them. And so we've had to close down the portal. We're trying to catch up, and hopefully within the next week, we can open it back up for all businesses. And yes, people can apply for EIDL, even if you have the PPP.
So Mahan Tavakoli, our chair, has asked, some banks aren't processing requests. Are there other financial institutions you can go to help you with this?
All right, so I'm gonna answer the question this way. So if you already have an application with a bank and you wanna go somewhere else and apply, please let the current institution know that you're withdrawing your application and that you're going to go to a Cabbage, PayPal, on deck, okay? Because here's what happens, and here's what's been happening. So people have been applying to 4 and 5 financial institutions, hoping that it would improve their chances of getting the money right away. Well, what happens, it's called E-Tran. The SBA system actually flags your employee identification number. And so it will kick you out of the system, okay? And so there've been many bankers that have been complaining that, all right, ABC company has already received approval from, let's just say, TD Bank. And here we are, Congressional Bank, Bank of America, we'll say Industrial Bank, us 3 other banks went ahead and processed this. And so now we've done all this work and it's kicked out their EIN number anyway. So remember, you can only have one PPP loan per EIN. So if you're at a bank that's not processing, go to one of the fintechs to actually apply. They're actually getting it done much quicker.
So the question about companies giving their employees $25 a month for cell phone use, since they're using their personal phones on the job, does that count? Is that an eligible expense under PPP?
As long as you can document it, sure. Yeah.
And is the small business, Beverly Hudnut wants to know, is the Small Business Innovation Research Program currently fully funded, $2.5 billion a year?
Yes, 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 it is.
Jeff Rossan asked about the EIDL 10,000 grant, which is you can get up to $10,000
Yes. Yes,
or up to 10 employees.
yes, that's right.
And then the distribution of the money, is there a place you can go to look at where's the PPP, where's the EIDL money been awarded by states, by counties, any place you could take a look at that to see where the
Oh, okay. Actually, let me put on my other set of eyes. All right, so EIDL. Now I don't have the breakdown by state for PPP because as of Wednesday, they didn't have that information for me. But let's go with EIDL because I have it by jurisdiction. All right, so we'll start with Maryland. So 1,298 applications have been approved for $199,630,800 for the state of Maryland. For DC, 380 applications have been approved, 82,165,800 has been approved. In Virginia, the Commonwealth, 1,805 applications have been approved for 281,449,100. Okay, so that's the breakdown per the three jurisdictions. And there's more to, and obviously there's more to come.
Can we get that on the SBA website, or where is there a place we can look that up?
Actually, no, not yet.
Okay.
I asked for the information, so they fed it to me.
That's why we have you on here, Rod.
Okay.
Giving us the scoop.
So yes.
So Margarita Roosevelt wants to know, for the self-employed who have home offices, how do you document that expense along with mortgage interest as an eligible expense?
Okay, so the mortgage interest, because obviously your CPA is taking a portion of your home and giving it a number, right? That says this is how much you use for office space in your house. And when you pay the mortgage, I'm sure on the schedule, I'm hoping, because it should, on the Schedule C show up there, the amount of interest that's being paid that's assigned to your home office. So that's what you're going to, that Schedule C that actually shows that is going to be a part of the documentation that you give the bank. And also, you know, the expense for your phone and internet, all that stuff should actually show up on the Schedule C. So that's what you're going to use as documentation to give to the bank, as well as the money flowing through the bank account to show those expenses, right? So between the bank statement and your Schedule C, that should be the documentation that you use to prove that the money has been used and allocated appropriately.
So was that from your 2019 or 2020 taxes? Which way do you look?
Well, it should be hopefully, and that's the other thing. Everyone, I hope that, you know, you have filed your 2019 business tax returns. I mean, I understand that we've been given, you know, that it was pushed back as well as the personal tax return, but at least your business tax returns, I would hope, have been filed. And we're into May, right? So we're 2 months out already from when the tax returns were supposed to be originally filed. So hurry up and get those 2019s filed, okay? So you can have that Schedule C. Or hopefully you guys are using QuickBooks, okay? So if you can produce a balance sheet and income statement for 2019 out of QuickBooks, that will serve as documentation also. But the tax return is much better, right? It's an official document.
Another question on, we have some employees who work on federal contracts. Are those payroll expenses eligible for PPP?
Are they a 1099? If they're a 1099, yes, they are. If they're a W-2 and they're working for someone else, then they'll be calculated into their employer's numbers. So it depends on what perspective we're looking at it from.
And Lance Ford asks, if your payroll cycle doesn't line up with the 8-week measurement period, do you have to make accruals to adjust, or will the measurement be on a cash basis of what was paid during the 8 weeks?
It'll be on what was paid during the 8 weeks.
Okay.
Oh, and here's another thing. Let me say this. We're hoping, because right now you have this 8-week window to use the cash. Well, here's what doesn't make sense. So you get this PPP money, right? You have to spend it up for for 8 weeks. Well, you may not be open, right? So then you may have to lay off your workers again, and then they have to get to the back of the line and apply for unemployment again. So that has been bubbled up to the halls of Congress. And so we know that there's discussion for them to extend maybe that 8 weeks so that you may not have to use the money within an 8-week period of time. And so we're hoping that our congressmen and women have heard the business owners and will extend that 8-week program, okay? Because I think that's critical.
So clarification on the question about employees working on federal contracts. They're not 1099s, they're employees of the company.
Okay, so then they'll show up on their employer's W-2. Their employer's payroll on the 941.
And then that's an eligible PPP expense.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, because it will fall within the 75% usage for payroll. Yes, absolutely.
Denise Hart's asking, it's taking a while with EIDL. You can't apply now. If you apply when it's open, it's likely they'll get their PPP money and that will have already been spent and forgiveness requested. Can you just get the grant only from EIDL?
Oh, yes, yes.
And what are the terms for EIDL if you want to get the loan part? Interest, time frame, things like that.
All right, so before they closed down the portal, it was taking about 5 to 6 weeks to process, okay? The terms, if you get the loan, is a 30-year term at 4%, which I still think are pretty good terms, okay? Man, I'm like, how can you not love the interest rates on these loans?
That's a house mortgage, 30 years at 4%.
Okay, like how can you not like the interest rates? And then on PPP, it's 1%. But back to EIDL. So the interest rate is 4%. Now, remember, they're capping it instead of at 2 million, it's now 150,000 because the funds are running low under EIDL. Remember, we had about $120 billion allocated to EIDL, and we're just about through that 120 billion, right, for EIDL. But we are hoping they open up the program, and yes, you can apply and get the advance that's automatically forgiven whether or not you apply for the loan, okay? And I think that's huge. So here's how I look at it. You have 10 employees, you automatically get that advance turned into a grant. You have PPP, as long as you use the funds within the parameters that the program speaks about, then that money turns into a grant. So you're not having to repay anything. I think it's a pretty good deal.
Is there a personal guarantee to EIDL?
There is a personal guarantee to EIDL. Yes, there is. And collateral if the loan amount is over $25,000. Yes.
And Jeff Rostan is asking about recent PPP safe harbor guidance issued for loan amounts under 2 million and those above 2 million. Do you have any insight?
Okay, so all right, well, the safe harbor is really, let me say this, and it'll probably make it simple. So for the Shake Shacks and the Potbellies and the Ruth Chris of the world, although under SBA guidelines, okay, they are eligible small businesses, okay? Now, having said that, they have pressure applied to them to return the money. And so the safe harbor rule applies to them, where I think they have until May 17th to return the money. And the SBA and the Department of Treasury will say, no harm, no foul. Okay, you just made a mistake. All right. Now, the over 2 million and under 2 million. Okay, the under 2 million, what they're basically saying is they're not going to really scrutinize the paperwork that you hand in if the loan amount is under 2 million. We're just going to wink, wink. We're just going to, wink and trust you that you have certified and told the truth about how the money was used. Once the loan amount is over $2 million, then it's going to go under a little more scrutiny. And that's where having the paperwork is really important, to be able to confirm that the money was used properly for the intended purposes. So that's what you're talking about there.
Rod, this has been extraordinarily helpful. It is got a lot of questions from our members here. I want to thank you for this. We still have a few minutes left, but one last question. Then I want to switch to things people need to think about as they start to reopen. I know you wanted to talk about that.
Yes.
From Todd Turner from Prince George's County Council. He said, had a small business apply for PPP and was awarded under $1,000. Is that amount correct? How do you check with that to see if that was the correct amount?
Wow, it was one. So was it well, if it's that amount, actually, I'm surprised that E-Tran even allowed them to process that, okay? Because usually E-Tran is, I thought 1,000, when I was a user not long ago, it usually had to be $1,000 and up. So, but what that tells me is that it had to be either a sole proprietor, single member LLC, or a 1099 for the loan amount to be that small, okay? So in that instance, if it's a sole proprietor, what they're doing is taking the net income, dividing that by 12 and multiplying it by 2.5 times. It's the same for a 1099 and a single member LLC. So that's why the loan amount can be so small. If it were me, I would have applied for EIDL, gotten $1,000 advance, which is forgivable, and applied for the loan, where I could probably get a larger loan amount than what I would have using the PPP formula. So sometimes you really need to do the math under PPP and then the math under EIDL. So let me give you the math for EIDL. So that's typically going to be your 2019 gross profit divided by 12 times 2. And the theory is that they're going to give you 2 months worth of working capital. So whichever number is larger under either EIDL or PPP, that's really the program that you should go with. But I'm strongly encouraging the 1099s, the sole proprietors, and the single member LLCs to go with EIDL, because generally the way it's worked out, they've been able to get more money under EIDL.
So let's shift to reopening. You're dealing with small businesses every day, of course, with thousands of them. And what are your thoughts on reopening, and what do people need to be aware of and concerned about?
Okay, so yes, I've been looking out into the future and say, okay, we're going to be past this by September 1, okay? So, because I do believe we're going to go through the summer with this thing. And so I said, okay, so now it's September 1. What is it that you really need to consider? Okay, and there's some things that they actually do need to consider. So first, they need to do a personal assessment. They have to, okay? One, do you really have the desire to open the business fully again? Because I'm not so sure that things are going to go back to the way they used to be. I'm not so sure that's really going to happen. So if you reopen, the revenues that you enjoyed pre-COVID-19, I just don't think are going to be there. I think it's going to probably take about a year to recover. Okay, so you need to think about, do you really want to reopen? Now, the other thing is, have you considered, while you're thinking about that, have you considered other opportunities? Okay, Now, here's another thing you should consider. Do you want to sell or merge with another company? Because maybe that's the way to go. Why? Because what you figured out is, like this survey said in the Post this morning, you may only have, outside of PPP, you may only have 1 month of operating capital left. So maybe it's to your benefit to sell the business or merge with another company in your industry. Now, this next one is very important. Will there still be a demand for your product and service post-COVID? Okay. Will there really be a demand? Another one is the liability of reopening. Because if you reopen, you're asking your employees to come back to work. Okay. Well, they come back to work. Well, what happens if 1 or 2 of your employees come down with the coronavirus? Okay. After you've asked them to come back to work, have you subjected yourself to, an employment lawsuit? So are you ready to, really take on that potential liability for your company? Have you done a projection of your cash flow to see where you are now and where you could be just 4 to 6 months out? You need to do that if you haven't done it. Have you looked at your expenses and really started to wring out as much as you can out of your expense base, okay, to, help you with your cash flow? The other thing is, once all these moratoriums are over with the banks where you went to your bank and you asked them for deferment on your loan payments for 6 months, whether it was your SBA or non-SBA loan, now what happens that you have to you have to pay the full freight, on these loans. So these are some of the things that you need to consider before you reopen. Now, okay, you decide to reopen. So how are you going to get that information out that you've reopened? Okay, where are you going to advertise? Do you have the advertising dollars to even do that once you've reopened? How many people are you going to bring back? How many people do you think you need? Have you made any improvements to your cybersecurity? Okay, because that's important. I mean, everybody's getting hacked. Unfortunately, a lot of companies are being hacked these days. So now, have you updated your cybersecurity? Have you made improvements there? Okay. Are there new products and services besides the ones that you offer that you're going to bring to market to now sustain you and help your business grow? So in my mind, these are some of the things that you need to, talk about with your accountant, with your lawyer, and with your commercial or business banker. 3 heads are better than one, right? 3, 4 heads are better than one, to come up with, should you reopen? And if you reopen, what are you going to do to sustain and grow your business? So those are the conversations I'm having right now with companies.
That's incredible, Rod. We're going to take all of that, the last bit about reopening, and call it Rod's Tips to Reopen, and publish it on our website. That's remarkable advice for people. It's not just being safe, it's you got to rethink your business and how you're going to proceed in the future. So here's a variety of local and national resources of small businesses that SBA has out. So if you could check that, if you've got other questions, that'd be great. And Rod, I just want to thank you so much. We're going to send an evaluation form out to everybody. Hope you all respond. You did offer at one point that you would give out your phone number.
Yes. Let me
personal questions. So for those who have hung on to the very end, how about if we do that?
All right. So it's 240-997-4024. Now, let me warn you that I'll just say several phone calls, but I do return all of my calls. Or you can reach out to me at roderick.johnson@sba.gov. And I do answer every single email. Okay. Now, if you email me, what I'll also do is I will email you back with all the frequently asked questions about PPP and the EIDL program to help guide you through how the funds are to be used and to begin to assist you with what documentation you need to prove that you've used the funds correctly, okay? And so I will do that. I will provide that information to you. Roderick.Johnson@sba.gov, and then the phone number 240-997-4024.
Are we able to take that frequently asked questions about the two programs and put it on our website for people to look at? Can we
Oh, absolutely. In fact, what I've been doing for the Greater Washington Society of CPAs, whenever there's been an interim ruling or an update to the frequently asked questions, I've been sending it to them and they've been posting it. So yes, I will certainly do that here. Sure will. I'll send it to you.
Great. Rod, thank you so much. You've gone a little bit over time here, but people have found this extremely valuable and helpful. And I'm just checking for one last question. Sorry.
I love this because I want to make sure that people are getting money in their hands to sustain their businesses. So please feel free to call me, email me, please do.
I'm going to ask you for a final word, but my final word is if you call Rod or you email him, please say you're an LGW member. You just might move up to the front of the list, okay? The benefits of LGWs.
Yes, yes.
Rod, any final comments for us? Thank you so much.
Yeah, actually, if you haven't applied, please apply, okay, for the money. Oh, well, you know what? We're out of time because I was going to mention one other loan program that's rolling out in 2 weeks. Do we have time for that or we have to go?
Go for it.
Okay, so it's put out by the Federal Reserve. It's called the Main Street Loan Program. It's already funded to the tune of $600 billion, okay? It'll be rolling out in 2 weeks. The interest rate on that is anywhere from 2.5% to 4%, but there is a minimum. You have to borrow $500,000, okay? That's the minimum. The repayment cycle is 4 years, and the normal underwriting that you would undergo at a bank applies. Now you have to use the money for payroll, but here's the thing. You can use that loan, you can have the PPP, and you can use the EIDL, okay? So the way I look at it is you have 3 federally funded programs that you can tap into to assist you with sustaining and hopefully growing your business out into the future. So I would be remiss if I didn't, mention that.
And is the Main Street program forgivable loans at any point, or it's
not forgivable? It's just a regular loan, and you would go to your bank to actually apply for that loan. But remember, it's going to be rolled out in 2 weeks because the banks have to be notified and all that to be ready to go.
So this has generated several questions here. Right? Bill Zink, any chance you could take a few more minutes to discuss in more detail the need requirements for that program? And is there a prepayment penalty if you don't need the whole $500,000? Is there a personal guarantee? What's the associated certification for that?
Okay, so now this is standard. It's going to be standard underwriting. So you're going to need to supply your 3 years of business and personal tax returns, a personal financial statement. If you're a government contractor, a contract backlog report. If you're a construction company, your work in progress report. So this is going through the normal underwriting, but I think with this one, it's just that the interest rate is anywhere from 2.5% to 4%. And the loan amount, here's the thing, how do you like this? The loan amount will go up to $150 million, okay? So not only is this for small businesses, but it's also for middle market companies also. So that way you won't have the Shake Shacks and the Potbellies and the Roof Chris, dominating the PPP. They can use this other program to get the funds that they need if you're a larger company.
And Bill Zink clarified his question to say he was talking about the PPP. Just one second here. His business is okay now, but come June, their needs going to be dramatically greater. And what is the
So this is
need requirement for that?
So, all right. So I'm going to switch gears from the Main Street. Here's something that he should do. I would go to my local bank. Here's the other program that you don't hear much of anything about under the CARES Act, and that's the debt relief program. Okay. So under this program, see, I'm glad you asked, Doug.
I'm glad Bill asked.
So under this program, you can go to your bank and ask for either a 7A, which is, basically for expansion, a 504, which is for real estate, or microloan. This part is unheard of. The bank will cover the first 6 months of that loan program on your behalf. So in other words, the SBA will pay the bank for the first 6 months of that loan payment. Okay? Principal, interest, and any fees for 6 months. So what I would advise him to do, since the Main Street program hasn't rolled out yet, then go ahead and apply to your local bank and get that underway. Just make sure that you have good projections that will show how you can pay the money back. And that's another way where you can, actually preserve some of your cash flow.
Rod, I can't thank you enough for this. This has been extraordinarily helpful to us. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your information. Thank you for offering yourself for the future for people to call or email to get their questions answered. So thank you so much. Stay tuned for more Frontline conversations. We've got Mayor Bowser coming up in about 10 days. So we got a lot of good conversations coming up, everybody. Thank you all so much for attending the call today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Be safe.